Hello and welcome to my video on radio waves. So, what is a radio wave? A radio wave is a wave on the electromagnetic spectrum in which electromagnetic waves are waves that are created by the vibrations and tensions between electric fields and magnetic fields. And so, radio waves have a frequency of about 300 gigahertz to 30 kilohertz, in which hertz is the measure of frequency that measures in cycles per second. So, how are radio waves used in our daily lives? First off, we have radars, microwave satellites, cell phones, TVs, radios, and even the military can use radars to help us to advance and so forth. So, a brief history on the radio and radio waves. Heinrich Hertz produced the first electromagnetic wave in 1888, with Sir Oliver Lodge sending the first message in 1894. Marconi sent the first long distance message in 1899, followed by the first analog phone appearing in 1970 as one of the bigger accomplishments within radio waves. So, how are radio waves created? First off, we have the electrical current, which is for our purpose, we're going to be looking at an example of a wire metal where we have copper, silver, or any other type of metal where we have the localized electrons that are moving around and they have left, and each electron from each atom have, in the sense, delocalized, as I just said, from their atoms. And as this happens, as they keep moving back and forth, we can see that the wire will start to produce an electromagnetic field. Unfortunately, this will be at a disadvantage because the wire can contain this electromagnetic field. So we need something that can help to transmit these waves. So scientists have developed a way to transmit these in the forms of antennas and satellites, where antennas can transmit radio waves to other antennas via satellites, and other antennas can pick up this current and amplify and process this information and produce television images on screen, which are very interesting and can be very useful for many different ideas. So now we're going to talk about one very easy example of how radio waves are different and how they operate in our daily lives, which is going to be in the form of AM versus FM, which are the radio frequencies that we tend to listen to in our cars. So amplitude modulation is the first one, which is AM, which sends different electrical signals based off of the differences in amplitude while frequency is held constant. So some machines interpret this differently, but in the example I've shown here, we have ones and zeros based off the differences in amplitude, and this can create different processes of information for machines. And in some circumstances, the differences in amplitude can help to create different sounds within the radio. The other one is FM, which is one that most people rely on, and this sends different electrical signals based off the differences in amplitude. And so now we have radio waves that can be interpreted differently based off the frequency. And in my example here, we have another binary where the differences in frequency we can see here produce ones and zeros, but in other machines, such as the radios in our car, the information that's transmitted will produce sounds that could correspond to music or someone speaking. So AM versus FM, which one's better? Obviously, it's going to be FM because both are susceptible to slight amp changes, but the amp changes within AM cause white noise or static noise, which we don't really want, versus the amp changes in FM causing no change because FM will not be affected. The frequency is not changing, so there's no white noise. So now we're going to take a look into other examples, and first off, we're going to look in radar and communications. So what is a radar? A radar is made of transmitter, antenna, receiver, and indicator, and these are all the parts that can help us to understand how electromagnetic radio waves are sent. And the most common type of radar is the pulse radar, which sends pulses of radio waves, and then based off the distance, based off the time that the wave needs to travel back and forward back to the antenna, will cause us to know what the real distance is. So the uses of radars, we can see that ships and planes use pulse radars to prevent collisions within the air and on the ground or in the water, depending on where or how they need to be used. And also they can help planes to secure a better landing where it may be harder to land due to an unclear landing site due to weather. And echoes in water channels are picked up by ships, which could help ships to navigate the ports that might be a little bit confusing. So the uses of radar, we have meteorologists, which can locate and predict weather movement, and their main method is using a Doppler radar. Scientists can use this radar knowledge to look at animal and migration, and distant planets. Military can use this for search radars and fire control radars. Honorable mention goes to sonar. It's not a radio wave, but it has active versus passive sound protection and sound reflection, which in terms of active and passive, that just refers to one being very amplified versus the other not. And both of these produce sounds that bounce back to produce distance. So how do cell phones work? Cell phones work where each of the cell phones are in a system of cells, and each cell has a base station that gives and receives radio waves. So the signal is sent to the phone station antenna, and then the cell phone signal is assigned to a frequency channel. Then differentiated radio signals are sent and received, which allow for speech to be carried through the radio waves. And this all allows cell phone calls to occur. So let's look at GPSs, because that's another big one that usually people are using all the time. So GPS basics, we usually have a network of 30 satellites, 20,000 kilometers above, and there are at least 4 satellites that can be seen at one time. Radio waves received by your GPS receiver, and that information is based off the time of the radio waves that it takes for your receiver to receive it back up to the satellite. So now we have the trilateration of the GPS, which in terms of what that means, that is the way that you're able to be located, where satellites A and B have spheres of effect, and the GPS receiver sends information to each satellite to determine where your location is. And as these spheres of area overlap, it can accurately pinpoint your location. And the more satellites that are able to overlap, the better, because then it can better pinpoint your location. So how will radio waves look in the future? First off, microwave cooking could become obsolete, because microwave cooking obviously sometimes leaves your food unevenly cooked, and new radio frequency cookers can be replacing them. And those are able to be fine-tuned to cook food perfectly and do it every single time. There's not going to be a time where something bad happens to your food. And then the next more hypothetical concept is how phones could absorb radio waves to essentially have infinite power, but this is still being in research, and it's not exactly a technique that we can, I guess, prove. There's no proof behind its efficiency. Well, thank you for watching my video. Here's some works cited of all of the sources that helped me to make this video, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you for watching my video.